President Trump is headed home tonight with no apologies after a weekend at the G7 summit. He defended his policies and tactics today and played down tensions with other world economic powers. White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor reports from Biarritz, France.
At the G7, a public show of harmony amid deep divisions. Presidents Trump and Macron ended the conference with the same kind of affection they displayed all weekend.
If there was any word for this particular meeting of 7 very important countries, it was unity. I think most important of all, we got along great.
But the takeaways from the gathering itself were meager. The 7 nations only agreed to a set of statements that filled a single sheet of paper. On many of the most pressing issues he discussed with the other leaders, President Trump pointedly disagreed. On Iran, Macron extended a last-minute invitation to Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif. The French president told Trump about the invitation only hours before Zarif arrived. Macron urged Iran to return to the nuclear negotiating table with the United States. The 2015 deal, which Mr. Trump pulled out of last year, hangs in the balance.
There will have to be a meeting between the Iranian and American presidents, and I would wish that in the coming weeks such a meeting would take place. I want this meeting to happen, and I want there to be an agreement between the United States and Iran.
President Trump said he is open to a meeting, but only under the right conditions.
If the circumstances were correct or the right, I would certainly agree to that. But in the meantime, they have to be good players. You understand what that means. And they can't do what they were saying they're going to do, because if they do that, they're going to be met with really very violent force. We have no choice.
The president also defended his trade war with China. He said increasing tariffs would encourage Beijing to make a new trade deal. He also claimed that top Chinese officials were eager to negotiate.
I do. I think they want to make a deal very badly. Maybe they want to and maybe they don't, but I think they want to make a deal. I'm not sure they have a choice.
Sunday was filled with confusion and communications chaos after the president said he had second thoughts about his strategy with China.
Any second thoughts on escalating the trade war with China?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Second thoughts?
Might as well. Might as well.
You have second thoughts about escalating the war with China?
I have second thoughts about everything.
But his aides later said he was only reflecting on whether he should be even tougher on China. He also said his style of praising and then criticizing his opponents was a winning one.
Sorry, it's the way I negotiate.
President Trump also defended his controversial push to have Russia again attend the annual meeting, returning the summit to the G8.
A lot of people say having Russia, which is a power, having them inside the room is better than having them outside the room. By the way, there were numerous people during the G7 that felt that way. And we didn't take a vote or anything, but we did discuss it. My inclination is to say, yes, they should be in.
He also repeated his incorrect claim that Russia was kicked out of the group because Russia outsmarted former President Barack Obama. He claimed an angry Obama engineered the ouster because of Russia's 2014 annexation of Crimea.
President Putin outsmarted President Obama. Wait a minute. And I can understand how President Obama would feel. He wasn't happy, and they're not in for that reason. And I say, how does that work?
Misleading statement that Russia outsmarted President Obama.
Well, he
when
did.
Other countries have said that the reason why Russia was kicked out was very clearly because they annexed Crimea. Why keep repeating what some people would see as a clear lie?
It was annexed during President Obama's term. If it was annexed during my term, I'd say, sorry, folks. It could have been stopped. But President Obama was unable to stop it, and it's too bad.
Russia's foreign minister said it has not discussed returning to the G7. Meanwhile, President Trump was the only G7 leader to skip a meeting on climate change. Though in his absence, leaders agreed on a $20 million aid package to help stop the wildfires in the Amazon. On climate change, the president said he did not want to sacrifice economic progress in the name of the environment.
I'm not going to lose that wealth. I'm not going to lose it on dreams, on windmills, which, frankly, aren't working too well. I'm not going to lose it.
Thank you.
With the end of this summit, President Macron passed hosting responsibility to President Trump, and he wants to host the 2020 G7 at his resort in Miami.
With Doral, we have a series of magnificent buildings. We call them bungalows. They each hold from 50 to 70 very luxurious rooms. with magnificent views. We have incredible conference rooms, incredible restaurants. It's like such a natural.
Since 2015, Trump Doral operating income has reportedly declined by almost 70%. But President Trump dismissed questions about the ethics of profiting from his presidency.
I'm not going to make any money. In my opinion, I'm not going to make any money. I don't want to make money.
It's still unclear when President Trump will make his final decision on where he'll hold the G7 in 2020, but certainly many people will be watching, John.
Yamiche, we heard you and saw you in that news conference press the president about his version of events of why Russia was kicked out of what used to be the G8. Why does he stick with his story, that version of events?
Well, President Trump is insisting that Russia outsmarted his predecessor, President Obama, and he wants to stick to that. Now, it goes with what President Trump has done in the past, which is blame President Obama when he's frustrated and when he feels as though he's getting unfair criticism. He's blamed President Obama for child separation, which is falsely a false accusation. He also blamed President Obama for not being tough enough on China. What is clear is that Democrats are already very frustrated with the stance of President Trump. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer put out a statement saying it's appalling that President Trump wants to add Russia back into the G7. He also said that it would make President Trump look weak.
Tell us more about the French president's efforts to mediate between Iran and the United States.
It's clear French President Emmanuel Macron wants to be a sort of middleman between Iran and the U.S. He said today that Iran's going to be having to get some sort of economic incentive in order to come back to the negotiating table and get something better than the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. But President Trump hedged a little. He said he doesn't want to give Iran any sort of monetary compensation, but he said something could be worked out with some sort of oil credit or some sort of letter giving Iran some sort of other kind of monetary incentive. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But Macron definitely wants to play a big role in that.
And you also reported, Yamiche, that the president says he's losing money as president. What do other watchdog groups say about that?
The president says by the time he's done being president, he will have lost between $3 and $5 billion. He hasn't offered any proof of that, and most watchdog groups say he and his family are actually making millions of dollars from him being president. An analysis by the Washington Post says that he's made at least $1.6 million for his properties because he's been visiting them in Florida and in New Jersey. And I spoke to a watchdog group, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. Their spokesperson said that they're actually looking at whether or not there's any legal action they can take that will prevent President Trump from holding the G7 at his Doral property. So we have to look out to see what watchdog groups might do on that issue.
Yamiche Alcindor in a very stormy Biarritz, France. Safe travels home, Yamiche.
Thanks, John.